where those who perceive truth may strive to make others see.
A big, powerful America, and shoot them for what?
On that continent, we are trying to forge a new identity for which we need each other.
I want you to imagine that you are called into onto a crime scene. You're an investigator. You're called onto a crime scene, and you walk into this home, and you really and you notice just how much blood has soaked into the carpet, and it's never been this bad before, but you know something very foul has just gone on. When it comes down to this report, we'll be talking about chaos by Tom O'Neill, and this is really a reporter or a journalist who was writing I think it was like a 30-year anniversary report on the Manson murders, but it turned into so much more because it was really just the book was essentially how that report transitioned into a rabbit hole, and it's striking because when the first chapter is really going into the idea of really what's publicized about the murders, and it almost I almost wanted to put the book down because of how how disgusted it made me, and I think the fear evoked by those murders was something that was very much palpable to not even just like the murders themselves. They took place in Hollywood, but around the world, or around the country, I'll say. It had a real effect. In terms of the effect in general, there's a lot of implications, but it's essentially this, in terms of this rabbit hole. This guy talks about how he talks, he opens the book, and the first chapter he talks about how this wasn't going on, but before that it's an it's some kind of like a before the chapters start, it's him talking to this judge, and how this judge is threatening him and making sure, and trying to really scare him into essentially not reporting on this stuff. And in terms of, we'll go over later, but this judge was a real piece of shit, basically, in terms of a lot of things. But the public details about the murder, they describe it's fucked up. In terms of this guy Manson was apparently he manipulated these 20-somethings, the younger 20-somethings, to do murders, and the trial that took place was about really how a lot of it was how they could really prove that Manson had a significant amount of control over these people in one way or another to commit these murders, because he wasn't physically there for some of these murders, and or for particularly one one case where, you know, it was multiple more murders, but one event where multiple murders took place, and those were really key for this particular trial. Um, and Manson himself, like, he had this background where, like, it was just riddled with, I mean, you, like, in terms of understanding, like, oh, okay, well, yeah, it makes sense that he tried to manipulate people to commit murders. Like, he had a background in jail, like, it was like in jail from like juvenile detention to regular penitentiary, or, you know, to the regular jail sentence, and it was just like, how in the hell does this guy get out? Like, I mean, does this guy? At some point, you start to ask yourself, how does he, like, how does he get off the radar? And a lot of that was a part of this rabbit hole. Um, in terms of like the description, like Manson himself, like the description behind, like, his years before the murder and the murder itself. I mean, it kind of, like I said, it really made me want to put the book down, but it also made me realize that maybe this is kind of a shield for a lot of this, because a lot of people won't go and hold officials accountable for a lot of this stuff. And it made me think about the same shield that we think of, that really, really protects the idea of Jeffrey Epstein still being able to be like, in terms of like, him, the investigation behind, you know, you see the messed up things that, you know, this guy's accused of doing, but you don't see like a lot of this stuff behind, like his financial crimes, right? Like, and if anybody followed that with any kind of thorough investigation, they'd find a lot of people like were tied to this guy, and we don't see that in the media. It's not something that's publicized. It's not something that like we really think about in terms of like, when we think about Epstein, the idea is he's a child molester. Let's just not talk about it. And I think like going beyond that point to understanding what really, really like, when we start to investigate who this person was, it's something. If you want to learn more about that, this One Nation Under Blackmail. There's gonna be a report about this, and like in the future, it's something I read through once. I want to read through that twice. When it comes down to Manson, like, he's like I said, he's described as pretty much. He, like, the description of Manson himself, like even understanding like really his history. It almost serves as a shield, because like it's thought of like he was pretty much a pedophile. I'm thinking like he was like into like he's raped people, and he was caught raping people in prison. But it's you start to wonder, like, why was this guy not thoroughly investigated? And like I said, this rabbit hole, he tries to really, get a lot of people who were really influential at that time period in Hollywood to speak to him, and nobody spoke to him. No, everybody who was like around during that time, they really weren't vocal, and they weren't willing to be and take part in his report, and it was like it was very much something that he was like avoided with this idea of investigating what happened. At some point, his defense, uh, he gets in. He starts to. He starts finding out about a spectrum of people involved, and you know, he starts interviewing. Eventually people. He gets to talking to some people, and he learns. It's kind of a. I mean, it's such a messed up puzzle piece because a lot of people were making like it in terms of, I'm sure he got lied to on a regular basis by a lot of these people, but some of them were like it's just like they were very open about this idea of Manson being of course around or people involved, drug dealers, as you'd expect, drug dealers to be involved, but not understanding, the victims also kind of, or in terms of the idea of the victims being attached to drug dealers, definitely like drug, like when I say like MK Ultra type shit, like in terms of like understanding the case itself. It was just such a it was really it was a shit show for a while, but eventually this guy, he gets on and he's describing like how basically people from the music industry were involved, specifically the Beastie Boys he mentioned, and like how he was really Manson was really in the music, or trying to get into music and shit like that. But also like government spies really having influence over this case, or what is alleged to be a government spies to have influence over this case. And this idea of really it's the image of some guy bringing a witness to present a case, like in the element of, we already know the narrative that we want to go with. You fit this narrative, like, and like someone being able to just drop these guys off, or drop a witness off, and really not be, without being under, like, without really being known themselves. It was definitely like shady in terms of understanding, like the judge involved, he ended up like essentially saying he didn't know these people, but they were clearly involved in the case. And I think I lost count of how many times this guy was told, I don't remember, and things like that. It's like it was pretty crazy. But at some point he mentions how like Charlie, like this guy defending Charlie Manson was like he was an unhinged character, but but he was paid for by someone who would quote unquote surprise anyone who was really paying attention, in terms of like this this element of him defending Charlie Manson and being known as pretty much a goofball was something, because it was just like this is, somebody wanted this goofball there. It's pretty crazy. Like some people weren't allowed to testify, like people who were involved in the case weren't allowed to testify in some cases. It was just like you don't fit what we're trying to make everyone believe. And that's the feeling it really brought up. Now one thing that came apparent, or that this guy outright said, was like the judge would be sentenced to death because of the fact of how, that was really the like, in terms of the nature of the case itself and the crimes that the judge committed. He would be sentenced to death for intentionally mingling with the case if this this investigator's claims were found out to be true. And that's like, in terms of the idea now, I think he's dead. But when we think about a renovation of any kind, I think it's really important to know to not understate the idea of there's people being sentenced, going to jail, being sentenced to death. I think that's going to be a requirement when it comes down to real trust accruing, and people who are people who may have standing in terms of with the current government as it stands now. It appears like a lot of these guys are, like, in terms of like viewing these guys like sweating in an interrogation room. Like, I think a lot of these guys need to understand and be, honestly, a politician's job should be the most dangerous job. And I think like the idea of like calling for a war is I think you'd have to be willing to see your loved ones go to war. You know what I'm saying? Like, you'd have to be willing to see that in order for you to call that. I really do believe that, like, a lot of these guys, like, they're sitting high right now, and they're comfortable in, lying to people that they represent. And when it comes down to it, I think recognizing this and this recognition of, them committing real crimes that are legitimately, like, punishable. I think that's something that we really should. This is going to be something that's like this judge in this case coming, in terms of like coming to understand this and coming to reinvestigate what's going on. I think that's going to be a real big part of this. And I think that this investigation should definitely be someone on the outside looking in, and someone who's clearly on the outside with no, like, real intention, or with no real connection to the inside, period. Of course. When it comes down to another thing, like, there was at some point, this, Tom's like talking to this investigator, or not investigator, this detective who was thought to be like trustworthy, and he gives Tom one story, and then when Tom starts kind of running around with kind of this understanding, he completely like does a 180 on like Tom the next time he speaks to him. And the idea is, hey, like, I'm not gonna go against the script if these guys aren't going against the script. And the thought was is that, or the feeling was is that this guy was trustworthy to an extent, and or this guy was trustworthy, a good detective, but that is, that's in terms of situations like this, the pressure put on these guys, I really think, in terms of like really understanding how these guys should operate, or really getting these guys to operate the way we expect them to, I think it's going to come down to the pressures that we put on the powers, the political structures above us, in terms of the representation being in order before these guys really fall in line. Because that 180, like, it was extreme. It was very extreme in terms of the story changing or something. But it was crazy. Another thing was the largest raid in Cali was done on Manson and the ranch before the murders. So this was like, in terms of like, kind of him, like Manson, almost like it seemed like Manson was perceived, or like if you were looking at the case in general, or the history, of law enforcement being involved with Manson, you would think that he was really a high level informant. And it definitely, like, in terms of the ties, it was this is like, in terms of him being tied to like I would say, like, the idea of him being tied to law enforcement or the government in general, it's almost unquestionable that he definitely had roots in government. And at some point, like, it's mentioned when this guy starts digging in that, essentially he was on parole and he violated parole to go to like some different city. At some point he couldn't leave LA and he left LA to go to another city. I forget exactly what city. I believe it was a city in California, but I don't know. But he goes there and he's like, it's almost like he was asked officially to go somewhere else. And the violation of probation was essentially a slap on the wrist at that time. And this was like, it's, in terms of the violation of probation, essentially coming down to a very I'm just looking at somebody, or I'm just visioning somebody telling their dog, no, don't do that, like, and then like walk, like, it's pretty crazy to think, but like, this guy was able to essentially go where he, like, wherever. This judge did a book, and this book, of course, mentioned, like, it left like a lot of what's a lot of Tom's findings out, in terms of chaos. This book, Chaos, but it's really something, because one thing in particular, in terms of the transition that this guy made, we're talking about some pretty, like, he became a cult leader at some point, and that was like really, there was in terms of that point, Tom viewed it as really this year where he was essentially like, I mean, it seems like he was almost trained by, like, this guy who was tied to, MK Ultra and and this facility, what was it? I forgot what kind of facility it was, but it was just a facility that tested drugs, and they were like, in the middle of a drug-ridden neighborhood. It was so crazy. But like this guy was like doing experiments on drugs before they became like widely spread throughout the neighborhood. It was like, what the fuck? Like this guy's like, and like this guy was like able to exist here, or able to like be in this place, which is insane. But it was like this idea wasn't. I mean, it was claiming ignorance got him so far. You know what I'm saying? Like it was just so ridiculous. But yeah, he was, and he had a lab or a facility in the middle of like this place that was drug ridden, doing tests on drugs, and it was like well like it was pretty crazy. But the zoom out was insane, because he starts talking about how Manson was essentially like this guy's like or at some point Manson went to this facility on a daily basis. But like this isn't, or like the book that the judge I forget what the book is called, but honestly, fuck that book. But when it comes down to like really like understanding the lack of the lack of like the lack of morals that like a lot of like in terms of a lot of that was rampant throughout like our like that was rampant throughout our government. It was so crazy to think. But I mean, they were very brave. I mean, this idea of a facility existing in the middle of a neighborhood that is literally faced with this problem, testing the drug that is that problem, and just not even, like, oh, we were really fortunate to get that drug. Yeah, I'm sure you fucking were. It's just like, what? Are you serious? It was crazy. But that's something it was very, very like very, very, very apparent in terms of the idea of what they were able to do. In terms of zooming out, this guy was like, this is like he talks about COINTELPRO, and the like how basically, I didn't know this before this particular like book, or these particular books that I've read. COINTELPRO was essentially counterintelligence. That's what it stands for, counterintelligence. And the idea was like a lot of I think I want to say Fred Hampton was murdered only days after Fred Hampton was murdered, and this was like secondary to the news. But like, if you're, it's crazy to think, but a lot of this was an umbrella in the way that it absorbed information, but also in the way that it was really kind of, of course, victim. When we think about Manson, I think a lot of us think about how this hippie movement was essentially became the criminalization of really the idea of hippies. And at some point, this idea of someone said when they were like really when they were pressed, like, no, the Manson murders was a case of MK Ultra gone right. And I mean, in terms of how a lot of, like, when it comes down to a lot of the focus, then I think it's a lot more subtle now. But I mean, I don't think these guys got any real punishment for doing any of the like what they've done. There wasn't. I don't think there was real punishment for it, and I think that ultimately these people exist within a structure still. But in terms of like the zoom out goes, he talks about how, like, this Fred, I think I want to say was Freddie Hampton was murdered only like a few days after, the same week of the Manson's murders. But he also talks about how, like, there's other agencies there's other operations within the government that the people really didn't know about. One was actually named Chaos, and this was like a government spying operation. And the idea was, the idea was rooting out, anti-war people, or people, war protesters, and also communists in general. But like, they essentially put this on, like, this was on full operation mode. Like, if you were against war, if you were, pro-communism, this was, a criminal act to people who, to essentially your government. And definitely people need to understand nowadays that, the power, like I said, the power that we're giving the government now, I think when it comes down to like, essentially tying the same news that's going to be used around your neck, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's pretty insane, but it's real. It's real, and it's something that we need to worry about. And at the end, like, this guy goes into this argument that he had with the judge and his in his kitchen or something, where this guy, he sets up the kitchen like a courtroom, and like, his wife is like the witness or the official or something. I don't even know what he was trying to do, but like, he structured, like, the argument, or this particular, like, a case against him, and it was so crazy. But at some point it just became very obvious that to anybody drawing conclusions that this judge was lying, and he lied about a lot of things. And he became, like, unhinged. Like, this guy is somebody who, like, he accused his wife. He thought his wife was fucking the milkman, and he, like, essentially, basically, he followed the milkman and made threats to the milkman. And this was like one of the, like, or at some point this came out and, like, ruined some kind of public or some kind of campaign. I think he was, like, going for some different office, and it ruined the campaign when it came out. I think he was accused of also. I think he was accused of. I know he's accused of stalking the milkman, but I think also he was accused of. Well, you know what? Let me not go into that. I don't know if he really did beat his wife. But in terms of the milkman stuff definitely happened. And this guy, like, he's basically threatening this guy. Hey, look, don't go against me. You don't want to go against me. And, essentially, like, Tom just walks out in terms of, like, okay, whatever. And he gets a call from, like, one of the people who essentially was like, I think a witness or something, and he was just like, yo, the judge called me. He said that you're into like 14-year-old boys. And it was just like, wow, how on point for them to, like, you know, be consistent. I'm not sure, like, the idea of, like, oh, this guy was found who committed suicide and had porn, who had kitty porn on his computer. It was just, like, so fucked up. But it was just like, like, nowadays nowadays it seemed as if, like, this idea, like, and almost like, okay, well, now I should probably stay away from you, and I should definitely stay away from you, and that is that's the like, that was, like, this guy's thought process was he was gonna call everyone who essentially gave this story backing. And this like I said, the the judge, like, he was a piece of shit. Like, I can fairly say that without any disclaimer. Like, he was a piece of shit, but, like, really going into and understanding a lot of when it comes down to the power that this guy held, it was real, and it was over a lot of different lives. And like, he had no morals, and it got in places. And essentially, when we talk about now, it's not something to underestimate in terms of the idea of a renovation versus a revolution. The idea of how much room I think a lot of the political class may believe that they have to essentially using the fact of what would, the good. I think a lot of that is dissipated, and I think a lot, like I said before, I think when you're involved in that class, I think it should be one of the most dangerous jobs in the world because of just how much pressure that the people can put on you. And when it comes down to that pressure, I think it really is going to come down to an informed populace. And I'm your bookman for this report. I am Bookman Sleepy, and I hope to see you in future videos. Please like and subscribe if you're on YouTube, and subscribe if you are watching, or if you're on some kind of podcast platform. Thank you.